Some stories in the Bible feel almost like epic legends. They are filled with strength, betrayal, pride, and consequences that change everything. One of those stories is the story of a man whose strength seemed impossible to defeat. His name was Samson. For many people, he was a hero. For others, he was a terrifying enemy. People have asked, where did his incredible strength come from? But this story is not only about a strong man. It is also about a woman whose name became forever connected to him. Her name was Delilah. To understand what happened, we must begin long before they ever met. Samson's story began even before his birth. His parents had lived many years without children, but one day, a messenger from God appeared to Samson's mother and gave her an unexpected message. She would have a son dedicated to God. The angel explained the boy would be a Nazirite, living under a special vow of dedication. This vow included rules. He could not drink wine, touch anything unclean, and most importantly, his hair must never be cut. When the child was born, he was given the name Samson. As he grew, it became clear that something extraordinary was happening in his life. The Spirit of God began to move within him, giving him strength beyond ordinary. Stories began spreading about him throughout the region. One day, while traveling toward Timnah, a young lion came roaring toward him. For most, this would have been a deadly encounter, but Samson did not run. Instead, he grabbed the lion with his bare hands and tore it apart. No sword, no spear, only his strength. Over time, Samson became deeply involved in the conflict between Israel and the Philistines, who constantly oppressed the people of Israel. Samson began confronting them. On one occasion, he captured 300 foxes, tied burning torches to their tails, and released them into their fields. The fire spread through their crops, destroying their harvest. Each time the Philistines tried to capture him, they failed miserably. Once they tied him with strong ropes, but he broke them as if they were thin threads. He even defeated an army using a jawbone. For the Israelites, he was a symbol of hope. For the Philistines, he was a dangerous threat that had to be stopped. They realized they could not defeat him in open battle. They began searching for another way, and that is when Delilah entered his life. When Samson met Delilah, he fell deeply in love with her. Perhaps it was her beauty or her voice. He began to trust her deeply, but others were watching. The rulers of the Philistines offered Delilah a proposal: discover the source of his strength for a large amount of silver. Delilah now faced a decision. On one side was the man who trusted her. On the other side was wealth and influence. One day, she asked him where his great strength came from and how someone might defeat him. Samson likely smiled, thinking it was harmless. He told her that if someone tied him with 7 fresh bowstrings that had not yet dried, he would become as weak as any other man. That night, while Samson was asleep, Delilah tied him up. Then she shouted that the Philistines were upon him. But the moment Samson woke up, he snapped the bowstrings as if they were thin threads. The men hiding nearby had to retreat quickly, but Delilah did not give up. She returned to Samson and accused him of deceiving her. And so, a dangerous game began. But Delilah did not give up. After that first failed attempt, something about the way she spoke to Samson began to change. Her tone no longer sounded curious or playful. Now, she sounded hurt, almost offended. She told Samson that he had made a fool of her. She accused him of lying and playing with her feelings. Samson may have believed that this was simply an emotional conversation. Perhaps he thought she was only upset and that the situation was harmless. But behind that conversation, something far more serious was happening. The rulers of the Philistines were still waiting. They were determined to discover the secret behind Samson's extraordinary strength. So Delilah asked him again. She asked him to tell her what could truly make him weak. Samson once again chose not to tell the truth. He told her that if someone tied him with brand new ropes that had never been used before, then he would become weak. Delilah listened carefully to every word. Again, the Philistine men hid nearby, waiting for the signal. When Samson eventually fell asleep, Delilah took new ropes and tied him tightly. Then she cried out that the Philistines were upon him. But once again, something unexpected happened. Samson woke up and easily tore the ropes apart. To him, they felt no stronger than thin threads. The Philistine men who had been hiding had no choice but to withdraw again. Their second attempt had failed. Delilah confronted Samson again. This time, she spoke with even stronger emotion. She told him that he had mocked her again. She said that if he truly loved her, he would not keep his heart hidden from her. This was emotional pressure. Samson had faced armies and dangerous animals without fear, but this was the constant questioning of someone he cared about. Day after day, Delilah continued asking him the same question. Each time, she suggested that he did not truly trust her. Over time, Samson began to feel exhausted. Finally, Samson gave her another answer, telling her to weave the 7 locks of his hair. Delilah waited until Samson had fallen asleep. Carefully, she took his hair and wove it into the loom just as he had described. But once again, Samson woke up and pulled himself free. At this point, the Philistines must have been growing frustrated. Instead, she increased the emotional pressure even more. She pressed him daily with her words and urged him constantly. Slowly, Samson's resistance began to weaken. Emotional exhaustion was beginning to take hold of the strongest person. Eventually, Samson reached a breaking point. He finally decided to reveal the truth, explaining that a razor had never touched his head. From the moment of his birth, he had been dedicated to God as a Nazirite. His long hair was the sign of that vow. If his hair were ever cut, his strength would leave him and he would become as weak as any other man. Delilah sent a message to the rulers of the Philistines. They came again, bringing the silver they had promised. Meanwhile, Delilah made Samson comfortable and waited until he fell asleep. When he was fully asleep, Delilah called for a man. That man came forward and began cutting the 7 locks of Samson's hair. One by one, the locks fell to the ground. Samson's strength left him, and he did not even realize it. Delilah shouted once again that the Philistines were upon him. Samson woke up suddenly. In his mind, he probably believed he would rise and escape once again. But this time was different. The Philistine soldiers rushed into the room and captured him. The man who had defeated thousands could no longer resist. They seized him and carried him away. They did something cruel that would permanently change his life. They gouged out his eyes. The mighty warrior was now blind. They brought him to Gaza, bound him with bronze chains, and forced him to grind grain. Yet, even though it seemed like the end, something quietly began to change during those long days in captivity. While Samson remained in captivity, his life had changed completely. The man who had once walked freely now lived as a prisoner. The Philistines took him to Gaza. They wanted everyone to see what had happened to the man who had troubled them for so many years. For the Philistines, this moment was a great victory. For a long time, they had feared Samson and his legendary strength. He had destroyed their crops, defeated their soldiers, and humiliated their leaders. Now, that same man stood before them blind and chained. To make matters worse, they forced him into humiliating labor. They placed heavy bronze chains on his hands and feet. Then they forced him to work grinding grain in a prison mill. This kind of labor was normally done by animals or slaves. The man who had once been a feared warrior was now walking in circles, pushing a heavy grinding stone day after day. But while Samson worked in that prison, something began to happen slowly. The Bible mentions this detail quietly, but it is extremely important. It says that the hair on Samson's head began to grow again. To the Philistines, this detail may have seemed meaningless, but the hair had always represented something deeper. It was the sign of his covenant with God. As Samson walked in circles, he had a great deal of time to think. He could not see the world around him anymore. Perhaps he remembered the days when he had been strong. Perhaps he thought about the decisions that had led him into captivity. Perhaps he began to understand that his strength had never truly been his own. It had always been a gift given by God. During those long days of labor, something slowly began to change inside him. While his hair quietly grew, his understanding also grew. Meanwhile, the Philistines continued celebrating their victory. To them, Samson was no longer dangerous. He was simply a blind prisoner. Eventually, the Philistines decided to hold a great celebration in the temple of Dagon to honor their god for their victory. The temple was a massive structure supported by enormous columns. Many people even climbed onto the roof to watch the celebration. As the celebration grew louder, they proposed bringing Samson into the temple so that the people could mock him. So they sent for Samson. A young servant was ordered to bring him to the temple. Samson could not see, but he could hear. He heard the voices of the crowd. He heard the laughter and the mocking words. For them, Samson had become nothing more than a spectacle. Yet in the middle of this humiliation, Samson asked the servant for a small favor. He asked to be led to the pillars. So he guided him toward the two central pillars that held much of the structure's weight. These pillars were massive. As Samson stood there between the two pillars, surrounded by thousands of mocking voices, something unexpected happened. Samson began to pray. He called out to God, asking to be remembered. He asked for strength just one more time. Slowly, Samson placed his hands on the pillars. The people around him were still laughing, not realizing what was about to happen. Samson began pressing his body against the pillars. At first, nothing changed. Then, his muscles tightened with every ounce of strength. Slowly, the pillars began to shift. A faint vibration passed through the structure. Some people may have felt it beneath their feet. Samson continued pushing with everything he had. The massive pillars moved further. The temple that seemed unbreakable was under enormous pressure. And in that moment, something began to happen that none of the people gathered there could stop. As Samson continued pushing against the two great pillars of the temple, the people around him still had no idea what was happening. To them, he was nothing more than a defeated man, a blind prisoner brought in only to entertain the crowd. The celebration in the temple of Dagon continued loudly. Music echoed through the building, voices shouted with excitement, and laughter filled the air. Many of the Philistines believed that their God had given them complete victory over their greatest enemy. They believed that Samson's story had already ended. But in the middle of that celebration, Samson stood quietly between the pillars that supported the massive temple. The stone beneath his hands was cold and heavy, yet he pressed against it with growing determination. The crowd did not notice the change immediately. Some people were too busy celebrating. Others were laughing at the sight of the once powerful warrior now standing helpless among them. But slowly, the structure of the building began to feel the pressure. The pillars were enormous, designed to hold the weight of hundreds of people. As Samson pushed with every bit of strength he had, the pillars began to move slightly. At first, the movement was so small. A faint vibration passed through the floor. A few stones shifted quietly within the structure. Yet the celebration continued. Samson pushed harder. His muscles tightened with the last strength left in his body. In that moment, Samson remembered everything that had happened in his life. He remembered the days when the Spirit of God had filled him with incredible strength. He remembered the battles he had fought. He remembered the victories that had made his name famous throughout the land. But he also remembered the mistakes he had made. He remembered trusting Delilah with the secret. He remembered the moment when his hair was cut and his strength disappeared. All those memories filled his mind as he stood between the pillars. But now, Samson understood something deeper than before. His strength had never been his own. It had always been a gift from God. With that understanding, Samson pushed once more. The pillars began to shift more dramatically. Some voices in the crowd began to change from laughter to confusion. People on the roof began to feel the building move. Cracks began to appear. The temple that seemed unshakable was now beginning to tremble. Before anyone could understand, Samson made one final effort. With all his strength, he pushed the pillars outward. Suddenly, the temple began to collapse. Stones broke loose from the walls. Dust filled the air as the roof gave way. Panic spread through the crowd as thousands realized that the building was falling. The once powerful temple of Dagon collapsed in a thunderous crash. In that moment, Samson's life came to an end. But the Bible records something remarkable about that final moment. It says that Samson killed more of his enemies at his death than he had during his entire life. The man who had been captured, blinded, and humiliated became the instrument of a dramatic ending that no one had expected. Later, when news spread, Samson's family came to retrieve his body. They traveled to Gaza and carried him back to his homeland. They buried him in the tomb of his father Manoah. There ended the life of one of the most powerful and complex figures. The story of Samson and Delilah has been told for thousands of years because it speaks about more than strength and betrayal. It is a story about human weakness, about trust, about choices, and about consequences. Samson was a man of incredible power, yet he was human. Delilah remains one of the most controversial figures. Regardless of her motivations, her actions changed the course of Samson's life forever. Yet the story does not end with failure. It includes a moment of redemption. Samson found the courage to call out to God once more. In that final moment, he understood that his true strength had always come from beyond himself. This story continues to fascinate people today. When you hear the story of Samson, what stands out to you? Is it his strength, the betrayal, or the final redemption? Write your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy exploring these powerful biblical stories, consider following this channel for more.